Cairo, the capital of Egypt and home to the majestic Al-Azhar Park. Perched on a hill, this lush haven of peace extends over 30 hectares. Its cool greenery offers a stark contrast from the dust and din of the overcrowded city. When Al-Azhar Park was created in 2005, it was a revolution for the inhabitants of Cairo. For the first time, a contemporary space dared to take on the features belonging to gardens of the Orient and modernize them. Straight paths and flowing canals reproduce the designs and lustrous patterns of Oriental rugs. Like a vision straight out of the 1001 Nights, Al-Azhar Park is an enticement to enjoy the pleasure of life. A delight for the green team behind the success of this garden that is both so classical and yet contemporary. Architects Laila Masri and Maher Stino, botanist El Saadi Badawi, and Sherif Erian, the man in charge. Thanks to them, this huge green lawn has become Egypt's central park, where countless denizens of Cairo come each day for a breath of fresh air.
The main challenge came from creating an indigenous, local Egyptian landscape with Egyptian ideas, Egyptian materials, and Egyptian plants. A place that lets you feel like you're in Egypt. If you look around, the materials, whether granite or marble, are Egyptian. The lighting and the site are Egyptian. Even the water is Egyptian. We wanted to draw on the vocabulary of Islamic architecture to design a modern 20th century park. The idea was first to design this central axis that reflects the philosophy of ancient Islamic gardens. Stemming from the axis are a series of gardens that fit within a completely natural context.
As strange as it may seem, there are very few Egyptian gardens in Cairo. Most public gardens come out of the colonial era and are based on English gardens or Parisian parks, such as the Buttes-Chaumont or Parc Monceau. Oriental gardens stem from an age-old tradition rooted in the Oasis. Confronted with arid lands, desert peoples would protect their gardens behind high walls. Gardens of the Orient were conceived as enclosed havens of peace, removed from the world and time. For the ancients, such sensual and perfect nature in the middle of the desert was a manifestation of paradise on earth. Beautiful and welcoming, the verdant Al-Azhar Park transports us far from the chaos of the city, from the moment we set foot inside and hear the sound of fountains and behold the glistening marble of the main walkway. We need merely follow the path lined with 100 palm trees to find ourselves plunged in a genuine garden of delights. But behind this fragrant, soothing paradise lies a meticulous design that fascinates architects such as Nuran Abdelrahman. From the observatory, the young researcher never tires of studying this amazing place.
When you enter Al-Azhar Park, what you feel isn't related to a particular place. It's more of an overall feeling. The park represents the Islamic Garden that has developed over several centuries. You feel you are making a break from the outside world and entering a spiritual world that is completely separate from the city. This doesn't simply come from the visual design. It also comes from the sound of water when you enter the park and walk through it. When you enter the park, it really seems like you can no longer hear the noise of the city traffic. You really seem to hear nothing. The design has managed to create a real separation between this area of green and the street. You feel like you're entering a place that's totally disconnected from the secular world. That's why the park is a typical representation of the concept of timeless Islamic design. The Islamic Garden is meant to imitate paradise and its rivers. It's a simulation of the path to paradise.
Water is the most important thing. And the second most important thing in Islamic architecture is to use as little water as possible while creating the greatest visual satisfaction. Like waterfalls, for instance, that use very little water, but that we can hear, see, and touch. The least water possible while providing the greatest satisfaction.
Wending its way like a snake across the entire park, water is the central theme of our walk. Here, it originates directly from the Nile and flows through 10 kilometers of waterways to a large artificial lake, the reservoir for the entire park. Water is the soul of Islamic gardens. From canals to small waterways, the space is governed by water. From Fin Garden, one of the most ancient gardens in Iran, to the famous Alhambra in Granada, these sublime spots depend on a perfect mastery of hydraulic techniques. This is what gives life to Al-Azhar Park. The play of fountains and the wild shores lead the visitor to the banks of the Nile. Now that we've walked along the main axis of the park, let's head higher up. We lose sight of the geometric design of the walkways as the relief unveils the natural hills that slope gently down toward the city.
Between the altitude of the hill, which is 80 meters, and the passageway alongside the historical wall that's roughly 30 meters, there's a difference of about 50 meters. The topographical contrast is pleasurable for visitors of the park. People can walk here, then climb up the hill or come down. When you walk through the park, you see that lots of people enjoy sitting on the hill.
The hills to the west play an important role. From outside the park, they look like a magnificent flowering verdant field that rises above everything else. The problem we faced is that the hills are very steep. Putting plants there that require a lot of water would have created mudslides and caused damage to the park wall. So we decided to plant vegetation from arid regions that don't require much water. We had to adapt in order to preserve the wall and the environment.
This slope is a stark contrast to the elaborately organized plants found in Islamic gardens. Here, everything is spontaneous nature, a natural-looking vegetation that marks the modern character of Al-Azhar Park.
We planted all sorts of plants that are already found in Egypt's gardens. We have nurseries and, of course, greenhouses to grow them in. A park like this needs a great many plants, so we grew millions of them. Here, we've planted nearly 500 different kinds of plants, and each of them has several thousand varieties. So now we have a multitude of varieties. I went to the United States and visited Arizona, which is very hot and dry and has arid and desert-like soil. Water is rare there, as it is here. Their climate presents the same challenges we face. So I chose certain plants from over there that grow well and stand up to the heat, and I brought some seeds back. We planted them and grew a lot of them in our park. This is a sweet acacia from Arizona. It needs very little water. At the same time, it provides shade to protect from the heat. Its wood is quite solid, so it can withstand the wind. We also searched among ancestral Egyptian plants, those that are rare or dying out, like the sycamore. Today, this tree is an endangered species.
Meet the star of the park, the sycamore fig. It looks nondescript, and yet its nickname, Pharaoh's fig, comes from the fact that it was grown way back in ancient Egypt. Its wood has even been found in the tombs in the Nile Valley. This robust tree can live several hundreds of years and plays a prominent role in traditional Egyptian medicine. Its roots have deworming properties, and its bark is used as a cough suppressant. With its luscious fruit, the sycamore was one of the favored varieties found in bustans, ancient irrigated orchards where one could simply reach out and pluck fruit straight from the tree. Originally, Cairo was founded around one of these fruit gardens, and today, Al-Azhar Park has brought that back to the center of the city.
In gardens of the Orient, the bustan or fruit garden represents something essential for an Egyptian. From the time of the pharaohs, almost 5,000 years ago, until today, Egyptians have always loved having fruit or something edible in their gardens. They also want their garden to smell nice and look beautiful. Their environment has to be both practical and aesthetic, but also pleasant on a sensory level. These elements are all indispensable to an Egyptian's quality of life.
Personally, I feel the plants I've raised from seedlings are like children. If the slightest thing happens to them, I take it personally. Everyone who works here with me shares that same feeling of respect. Everyone, without exception, who works to maintain the park feels it's their duty to protect these plants. We have to do everything we can to preserve the natural aspect of the park in its current state.
It's hard to believe that barely 10 years ago, a mountain of trash loomed here. Since the 15th century, Cairo's inhabitants had been dumping their garbage on this hill. And yet, from the filth and refuse, a miracle was born.
It was a huge challenge to transform this mountain of trash into a garden. The first time Layla and I set foot here, we sank right down up to our thighs. There was garbage everywhere. It was really disgusting. At first, we thought it was impossible to create a garden here. Our initial reaction was, "You've got to be kidding." It was unthinkable to do anything here at all. Every attempt to build something on this site met with failure. That's why it stayed the way it was for 600 years without anything happening. What's more, the district where it lies, Darb al-Amar, was known to be the haven of drug dealers and criminals. It gave off a very negative impression. This place had a really bad reputation. When we got here, the challenge turned out much bigger than we'd expected. Problematic ground, difficult environment, geotechnical complications, everything was against us. But despite all these obstacles, we met the challenge. We wanted to prove that there were professionals in Egypt capable of building a park on a global scale, despite all the difficulties.
Beneath this pile of trash lay a buried treasure. The ancient wall of the city, bordering on the old district of Darb al-Amar. Create a garden, as well as restore the 1.5 kilometers of this 12th century rampart, such was the crazy idea of Prince Karim Aghan Khan, the wealthy heir of a great Middle Eastern family. Back in the 1980s, the art and culture-loving philanthropist had sensed the amazing potential of this giant trash heap. With the help of his foundation, he changed the fate of the polluted and congested Egyptian capital by offering it this lush park.
It took 4 years for us to build the park, 2 years below ground and 2 more above. 2 years of constant digging. Today, when people visit the park, they're impressed by the work that's been done on the surface, but they don't realize that just as much work went on underground to clear the land.
While today the pristine green offers a stark contrast to the surrounding ochre, getting here was no small feat. How to make this ground fertile and allow plants to grow. How to structure, enrich, and above all purify the various pollutants that were dumped here over the past 500 years.
We analyzed the soil, and the results were even worse than we'd feared. We realized the quantity of salt present in the ground was higher than in the Red Sea. The vegetation we planted only lasted 48 hours before it died. What's more, the soil here wouldn't allow any water to penetrate. So what we had to do was blend the original soil with other materials that would allow water to penetrate down to the roots. Otherwise, all the plants would die. We added sand to the original soil, and the plants finally managed to grow.
The hills on the western slope are crossed with winding paths where each bend offers a perspective of the city. The park shows its true colors to the neighborhoods around it, providing the inhabitants of Darb al-Amar, the working-class district below, their luxurious setting. The city of 1,000 minarets changes into a magical display for Egyptians who are once more proud of their city.
When you walk through Al-Azhar Park, you feel that its design is very successful because it creates a real link between people and their environment. That's what was missing from Cairo's other parks. Architecturally speaking, Cairo has undergone many changes, but the city has always been an ensemble of dense constructions packed tight against each other. The city is more horizontal than vertical. We've even encroached on some other parks to create streets or build buildings. Al-Azhar Park is an example that counters this phenomenon.
In this sprawling, congested metropolis, where buildings fight for height and only the Nile Delta offers a sensation of space, the infinite horizons of Al-Azhar Park are a blessing.
We know that in Germany or Iran, there are 17 square meters of green area per person. In Egypt, the green area available for each individual is barely a foot. In Cairo, we really suffer from a lack of green. It would take another 10 parks, such as this one, to meet the needs of Cairo's 17 million inhabitants.
The second thing, and perhaps the most important, is that 60 years before Al-Azhar Park was created, if I'd told an inhabitant of Cairo to go for a stroll in a park, he would have gaped at me and laughed in my face. Most people considered parks to be dirty places, ugly and dangerous. They were noisy places where you got harassed. Parks aren't part of our culture. When Al-Azhar Park opened, it showed everyone that no matter who they were or how important, whether they were rich or modest, a child or an old lady, a civil servant or simply anybody, everyone could enjoy this sort of public space. The park was designed to bring cultures together and for different social classes to rub elbows any time of the day, morning, afternoon or evening. And that has been Cairo's great turning point towards modernity.
Al-Azhar Park seems to achieve the impossible. The fusion between the secret paradise of the walled gardens of the Orient and spontaneous nature within everybody's reach. To end our walk on a high note, at the end of the path lies an open-air theatre nestled against the ramparts, a stage for song and dance.
When the park was created and opened in 2004, we tried to set ourselves apart by making it not only a place for walking, but also for leisure and culture. Culture doesn't simply come from walking along the paths. It's transmitted through the many different activities we've initiated in the park. There are musical performances, as well as a permanent theatre down at the bottom of the park. In reality, people don't come simply to walk. They also come to take advantage of the daily cultural programs we offer them.
On Fridays, we stop the fountain and offer an outdoor concert or other cultural performance. There's a range of diversity in the choice of activities on offer. People gather around and really appreciate these moments.
I'd like to tell a little story that moved me. We were in the park and a very poor man who was on a walk with his family hurried up to me. He asked if I was the one who created the park. Yes, it was me, I answered. He wrapped his arms around me and gave me a big hug, thanking me warmly for such a beautiful garden. It was an incredible feeling, unlike anything I'd ever felt before. He said something that surprised me. You can tell that the person who runs this park respects us as human beings, and in exchange, this is a place we want to respect.
At the end of the day, people gather on top of the North Hill to listen to the prayer and enjoy the sunset. We really didn't expect the hills to draw so many people. Today, the garden offers a panoramic view of historical Cairo that didn't exist before.
At sunset, the park offers a peaceful balcony over the bustling city, and the show continues after dark, whether seated in the open-air theatre or watching from a window behind the medieval wall. Al-Azhar Park is as much about exploration as reappropriating a cultural identity. A place that stands for the beautiful idea of culture within reach of all.